Crank up the volume and get ready for real-world bird hunting by listening to the Wingmen Podcast by Eastman's. Now your host, Todd Helms.
This episode of the Wingmen Podcast is brought to you by Savage. You know, guys, a couple years ago, I started shooting a Savage Renegade shotgun and cannot tell you how impressed I have been with the product. I've put thousands of rounds through a couple of different models that I have, and they do nothing but go bang and kill birds, and that is what I need in a shotgun. The fit and performance is next level. I love how comfortable they are. I love the fact I can adjust the fit if need be. I love the fact that the gun is super tough, cycles and works in all conditions, and gotta say, they just flame kill birds.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Wingmen Podcast. And my guest today is Jared Wicklund with Pheasants Forever. And you guys were kind enough to ask a couple of questions, but before we get to those, I'm going to have Jared tell us all who he is and what he does. I had the great fortune to get to hunt with Mr. Jared last year up in Montana.
Yes,
we had
sir.
a great time, but how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Todd. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been sort of a whirlwind fall. It's been a great fall up here in Minnesota where I'm located, and I've done a bit of traveling so far. But yeah, into the heart of hunting season here in mid-November. I'm getting ready to go up to deer camp to our cabin in Northwest Wisconsin. Looking forward to that and spending time with my dad. But I'm the director of communications for Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. So I handle, obviously, media inquiries, interviews like we're doing here, anything on the radio. I write a lot of press releases. I also do a lot of writing for the magazine and other magazines about some of our mission work in general throughout the United States. So it's a real blessing, and I feel pretty fortunate to be in this position because having to write about conservation, it's not a job, it's a love, you know, and I think you probably share that.
Yeah, 100%. I was actually getting to visit with some folks yesterday about some of the stuff that I have coming up and that I get to go do. And it's a blessing. I mean, a job's a job, right? There's days when everybody's job isn't very much fun. But when you look at what you and I get to do in the grand scheme of things, holy smokes, are we blessed?
Yeah, you write about or video about your passion and share that with other people, just like we did in Montana last year. So, yeah, no, I feel blessed. I'm sort of the PR guy. I get the chance to talk with a lot of members, a lot of agency folks as well who call in, maybe have questions, want to connect with somebody. Being able to connect with members on a just about daily basis and kind of hear their stories. And, you know, especially when it relates back to maybe a land acquisition that Pheasants Forever has done, or they hunted a habitat project that we were a part of, and like, hey, check out this picture. You know, I went out with my daughter, I went out with my son, or the whole family went out during the holidays, and we were able to knock down a couple birds. You know, it's heartwarming stuff, and that's what you know, taking families out together in the outdoors. I follow you pretty closely on social media. I know. I think was it your wife that just knocked down a nice buck the other day?
Yeah. That was
that was cool.
She'd been working pretty hard to do that on her own because she's usually got a whole passel of little ones in tow. But I had them that night. I had them that night. So yeah, man, it's the family aspect is awesome, and having places to go hunt quality habitat that produces quality numbers of birds.
Yep.
Is a rare thing, and it's something that Pheasants Forever takes very seriously, and in my opinion, does a phenomenal job.
Appreciate that. Yep. Yeah. It's having high quality habitat on publicly accessible land, and actually, you know, public lands is something we've been doing, or access, I guess. Access was added to our mission statement in about the last 2 years, and it's something we've always done since 1982. We've done all sorts of land acquisition, but when you take a look at the private land side that we do, we have over 350 biologists throughout the country right now that help farmers, ranchers, landowners meet their land use goals for their property. And then we've got the public land side, which is our build a wildlife area. It's our signature acquisition program where we work with partners, chapters, donors, to, you know, and a lot of times it's willing landowners that are saying, hey, I've got this property and I want to protect it in perpetuity. I'm not going to be around forever. I'd like to, you know, give this to Pheasants Forever, put it into public land somehow. How can we get that done? And that's where we step in and work with them. And a lot of times, you know, it's not just willy-nilly like, oh, here's a 40 acres out in the middle of nowhere. It has to be strategic. We're all about science, and, you know, how do we add on to a public lands complex to do bigger and better things for wildlife. And we've got about 82 projects right now in our pipeline. And you know, it's not a short thing. Land acquisitions take a lot of time, and sometimes they don't work out at all after we work on them for 2 or 3 years. But we've got about 82 in our pipeline right now, all throughout the country, with a lot of them in the breadbasket of America, where our big pheasant and quail populations are. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a good chance that if you live within a 500 or 600 mile radius of the Twin Cities, even maybe 1,000-mile radius of the Twin Cities, you probably got a Pheasants Forever project or chapter doing stuff close to you. And that leads me into our first question, and this comes from the last Wyomingite via Instagram, and he asks, yeah, it's a good one. He asks, pheasants in Wyoming and Wyoming projects, ? What's that look like?
Yeah, no problem. So Wyoming, I would say, is one of those outliers where we haven't had a chance to get too many chapters on the ground. So I think you know this, but maybe some of the listeners don't, is that everything we do at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever is locally led. So we are different than, you know, maybe Ducks Unlimited, National Wild Turkey Federation, Rocky Mountain Elk. We work with a lot of those organizations all the time and do wonderful things, advocacy, public lands projects. But the difference between a Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, and some of those other groups is we're 100% local. So I believe right now, I want to say, I think we have one chapter of Pheasants Forever located in Cheyenne. They're known as Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. And they have done some pretty good projects. One of them is they donate quite a bit of money to Access Yes, if you're familiar with that program in Wyoming. So you've got a chapter that's located in probably one of the bigger, is Cheyenne the biggest?
It is. Yeah.
Wyoming?
Cheyenne's the biggest town.
Yep. So the chapter there spends a lot of time. It's a lot of business professionals that get together. They have a wonderful banquet. They raise a lot of money, and a lot of that goes back to the Access Yes program, which is matched multiple times to put more public access. I think public access to private lands throughout Wyoming, which is awesome. So that's the big one there, and that's like, if you compare that to a state like Iowa, where I used to work as a regional representative with chapters, they've got 101 chapters. They raise a bundle of funds, and they're doing everything from land acquisitions to helping private landowners with seedings and those types of things. We've got multiple. I want to say we've got almost 18 to 20 farm bill biologists in that state who help out private landowners and meet their land use objectives. So it's a little bit different depending on where you go. I would say the West is still up and coming. If you go to a place like Montana, that's a bit more developed as far as Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. There's a lot of things going on there with their upland bird enhancement program, land acquisitions. We just got done with one called the Wildcat North acquisition, which was supported by a big meat eater fundraiser here in the past couple weeks. But it all starts at the local level, and Wyoming just doesn't have the chapter base to do things on a statewide level. But we do have probably one of the best chapters in the country in Cheyenne. They raise a lot of money, and a lot of that goes to the Access Yes program,
which is huge, and that's if you look at Wyoming, it's a different duck in the fact that we just don't have the population base that other states do. Even Montana, and Montana's not, population wise, isn't a huge state compared to like Minnesota, for example. I mean, there's more antelope in Wyoming than there are people. That's the expression. After last winter, it's
That's
probably
okay
not.
though. That's
Probably
okay.
not. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But because of that, we just don't have that model to be able to do that. So what the Cheyenne chapter's doing is putting that money into access. Yes, that is our Game and Fish public access program, and they're buying access through their fundraising for lots of different things, not just pheasants, but that goes into deer hunting and that goes into fishing, and that it's just a benefit for hunting in general,
And
which is phenomenal.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's basically like they're purchasing easements or purchasing access to private lands, right?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And it's a phenomenal thing. And because of our small human population and relatively small pheasant numbers as well, if you look at Wyoming as a whole, there's not pheasants statewide in the state of Wyoming. They're in patches. Where I live here, we have lots of pheasants in the Bighorn Basin because we have the habitat and we have agriculture.
Yep.
If you go someplace like, let's say Rawlins, for example, not a lot of pheasant habitat there. Now, I'm not going to say there's no pheasants there, but there's very little agriculture there other than ranching, just not the pheasant habitat. When I lived on the other side of the Bighorn Mountains in Sheridan, Wyoming, there's a very robust pheasant stocking program that the state runs on a lot of those properties, and state properties and access yes type properties that gives people opportunity to hunt pheasants that normally they wouldn't have. So it's a little different. It's a little different out here as opposed to someplace like South Dakota or Iowa, for example.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to when you have quality grassland that butts up against some type of agricultural crop. That's the crossroads where pheasants exist, and we just, some people wonder like, well, our pheasant habitat is so good out here, why don't we have it? It's like if you don't have an agricultural component at all, specifically like a grain of some sort, pheasants just they aren't going to be there. They require that. As part of their cycle. So
and that's one of the cool things. We have a few birds like here locally. Like I said, we've got pretty robust pheasant population. This year's hatch was really, really good. But we have other birds, other wild, native birds that are, holy smokes, they're a ton of fun. We have excellent sharp-tail hunting in certain parts of the state.
Yep.
We still have the most robust sage grouse populations of any state in
the country. Yeah. Does Wyoming have chukar?
We do. Obviously, they're not a native bird. We have chukars and huns.
Okay.
And in areas we have phenomenal chukar hunting. Absolutely world-class chukar hunting.
So, and that's where I think like some of those other opportunities to supplement any of the wild production that you get from pheasants. I kind of call Wyoming a sleeper state. Like you don't see as many people upland hunting there because they're going to other areas that have pretty robust wild pheasant and quail populations.
100%.
But it is a sleeper state, and and I wanted to sort of expand on that a little bit. We're involved in a lot of different things. Working lands for wildlife, for sage grouse, for lesser prairie chickens to try to help bring those birds back. We do a lot of work out west with farmers and ranchers on shortgrass prairie. So when you talk about sharp-tailed grouse, we do a lot of work on properties that are producing a lot of sharp-tailed grouse. So it sort of all comes together. But our habitat work is unique because I think it's universal. So when I say that, you and I might have talked about this when we were in Montana last year, but specifically,
we did, and that's why I wanted to get you on here so you could extrapolate.
Specifically in Montana, one of the things we're working on there is we actually have in Montana, Oregon, and I think maybe one other's coming online now, but we actually have what are called big game coordinators. And it's, you think about it and you're like, you guys have got a logo with a pheasant, a quail, and the sun behind it. And like, what does that have to do with birds? Well, this is the connection, right? Is that in these big game migration corridors, we're trying to keep grasslands in grasslands. So grasslands are the fastest disappearing ecosystem on the planet right now, probably the most imperiled, and that's due to just land use changes in general across the board. But for these big game migration corridors, we're working with farmers and ranchers, and also on the public side, BLM land, especially out west, just to try to say how do we keep sagebrush and grasslands on the landscape in bigger quantities to protect these migration corridors, and at the same time, those grasslands and those sagebrush flats are producing buku upland birds.
Mhm.
So that's sort of that connection. We work on a lot of pollinator habitat as well. I'd say Pheasants Forever is one of the premier organizations in the country for putting pollinator habitat on the ground. So flowering plants basically that support pollinating, and it's not just insects, bats, hummingbirds, those types of things. We do a lot of pollinator habitat, and we've gotten pretty high marks from folks on the seed mixes that we're putting out there. Typically have a minimum of 20 to 25 species that bloom throughout the year to make sure, and that's exactly what upland birds, the chicks, in their first 3 months of life, 100%, they exclusively eat soft-bodied insects. So we've really moved away at Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever and elsewhere, like at United States Department of Agriculture and some of the Farm Bill programs. We've really moved away from putting single species or like 3 species of grass cover on the landscape. You're not doing yourself, if you are a landowner listening to this and you're like, well, I just put out a brome mixture because it was cheap and it seemed like a good thing to do. I'm here to tell you that those mixtures of grass, we still need grass in some way, shape, or form, but succession over time, grass comes in and dominates. So you're better off selecting a high diverse mixture that's going to have those components in it that's drawing bugs in, because that's just sort of the bottom of the food chain and how it grows. So we've really moved away from single to just multi-grass species to more forbs, and grasses come in over time. So that's kind of been an evolution for this organization.
That's phenomenal, because I'm glad you hit on that, Jared, because I don't think a lot of folks, when they see the Pheasants Forever logo on a box of federal ammunition or on a hoodie or, wherever it might be, a decal, or they go to a banquet, I don't think a lot of folks fully grasp how big the work is that your organization does and how far their dollars that they spend at the bank, or anytime they, you buy a box of federal premium ammo, a chunk of that money goes to Pheasants Forever for habitat.
This episode of the Wingmen Podcast is brought to you by Kryptek. Guys, camouflage and quality hunting garments and apparel are vitally important to success in the field. You want to be out there when you want to be out there, and for as long as you want to be out there. And you need high quality garments and clothing and gear that's going to keep you concealed at the same time. Kryptek's variety of camouflage patterns and the offerings of apparel that they bring to market are second to none. I love being partnered with that company. I love the shared ethos that we have. I love the shared values that we have. And I'm super proud to support a veteran-owned American company like Kryptek.
I don't think people realize to a full extent exactly how far those dollars go.
Yeah, people like Federal, and they're one of our longest standing partners, and that's what brought us together last year.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the media hunt in Montana, trying their new heavy bismuth loads. But some of the loads are Prairie Storm loads, and also some of the high velocity pheasant loads and quail loads that they do. When you see that logo on the box and you purchase that royalty, their percentage of sales comes back to Pheasants Forever, and we turn right around. We're one of the most efficient conservation groups in the country still, and we've held this since 1982. It fluctuates a little bit between 89 and 91 cents on the dollar, goes right back into habitat, and that's why we have one of the highest efficiency ratings in the country. That's phenomenal, which is cool.
That's phenomenal.
We try to do that with all of our partners. When you see that Pheasants Forever logo, and you are absolutely right. I think some people think like, oh, Pheasants Forever, ringnecks, rednecks, and shotguns. I mean, honestly, that's sometimes people see that logo and they think that, but it is absolutely so much more than that. It's the habitat conservation side, it's the public and private land side, helping landowners, but also helping create access so people have places to go is a big thing. It's the advocacy side, fighting for the Farm Bill, fighting for the North American Grasslands Conservation Act is a big thing we're working on right now, similar to the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, but for grasslands.
Yep.
Over time, if you look at if there's been one constant for wildlife, it's been some of the funding mechanisms for waterfowl. And you look at waterfowl species throughout the United States, it's like those are one of the only species that have been doing pretty good, over the last 25 years here. And, you can point back and say, man, there's a mechanism there. We need that for grasslands. So we're working on that right now. And then the last one would be sort of conservation education. We've got a very robust program. A lot of it right now is tied to learn to shoot, learn to hunt events, where we're starting to go away a little bit from a couple hour events where 50 kids come in and they try to shoot a pheasant, to we're bringing people in and we're doing like 2 to 3 days of 3-day events, and we run them through everything from hunter safety to how to work a shotgun to doing the clay pigeon thing, and then taking them out on a live hunt. And a lot of that is both youth and it's adults, and some of those are focused on underserved communities as well. How do we get more of the bird hunting subsect to look more like America? It's an important thing moving forward. If we're going to sustain funding levels for conservation from hunters, we got to continue to be innovative in the things that we're doing on the landscape. And I feel, and the organization feels, that Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever is sort of the pointy end of the spear in that regard.
Awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, I really wanted you to get into that when it was perfect. That question from the last Wyoming, would just let us right down that rabbit trail, man.
Yeah,
it was ideal, because we had these conversations last year up in Montana, but that hunt was a ton of fun. I look back on that. That was when you and I first met, and we couldn't have picked a better place. And I'm bound to secrecy. I will not ever tell people where I was. No, it was super fun. Great guys, great camp. If I could do it again, I would do it in a heartbeat, because it was so much. We had such a good time.
Yeah. And shout out to Montana Upland Outfitters and
100%.
Federal and Onyx too, who sort of hosted us. I put the hunt together on behalf of our partners, and we were looking at some of those new loads, that heavy bismuth, which is it's a really good load for shooting waterfowl and upland birds. I mean, it's pretty awesome. But yeah, you talk about a picturesque place. For those that haven't seen it, and I think this is going to maybe follow up with the video for Wingmen too, but you're probably going to get a taste of what Todd and I and the rest of our crew there went through. Basically staying in outfitter tents on the Montana prairie. We were hunting in, I think it was sub-zero weather. I mean,
it was cold, man.
It was cold, but you got an awesome cook tent. And was it Kyle?
Kyle's the name of the cook.
Kyle's the name of the cook.
I've been keeping up with the Montana Upland Outfitters crew.
Yeah.
And every time there's always something to do with food.
Yeah.
Always. Yep. And I'm just like, Kyle. I just always comment, Kyle. The dude is masterful.
And, anybody who hunts, listens to this podcast, anybody who hunts in general knows that connection to food is just part of the reason why we do it. And, to go out and hunt pheasants and sharptails, and we did some waterfowl hunting, which was pretty insane. A couple of the days, you come back and Chef Kyle takes that and puts that, coffee rub on there and grills it or whatever. It was absolutely amazing. And the food was top notch. The camaraderie was as well. And, Anthony, his wife, Jordan, Stan, Bryce, all the other guides there, they're just stand-up quality. If you're looking for a hunt of a lifetime for upland birds or waterfowl, they do big game as well. I know they're very good at it. So Montana Upland Outfitters is a great place.
There you go. Good plug. Thank you for doing that. Those guys are top-notch. I will not disclose location, but you could go online, Google Montana Upland Outfitters, and you can see everything that they have to offer. Those guys they run a world-class operation. But yeah, dude, that was a ton of fun. I hope we get to do something like that again, wherever. I saw an interesting thing the other day, and I was watching, I don't remember what it was now, but I watched a special on Aberdeen, South Dakota.
Yep.
And I've hunted Aberdeen quite a bit in years past, and it is quite the little town as far as like a pheasant destination. And they have something unique there. And I was wondering how much Pheasants Forever, how much you guys do with it, but they have like a locally generated public access program. That their city has put together.
Yep. Yeah. The Pheasants Forever chapter there, actually.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about Aberdeen, and everybody talks about like saying Aberdeen, South Dakota as a hunting destination for pheasants. That's not hot spotting. That's just general knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah, Aberdeen's got one of I think the highest public lands base in South Dakota as far as upland acre goes. When you look at their walk-in program, CREP, game production areas and waterfowl production areas, Aberdeen is just always a wonderful place to go if you're looking for public or private lands hunt. It's top notch, and if you look at my Onyx app, you really can't even see the name Aberdeen or any of the region around there. There's so many freaking pins on the app that but what you're referring to, Todd, is the Aberdeen Pheasant Coalition. So
yes.
I'll just give you a little bit of background. Community-based conservation is really the way of the future as Pheasants Forever sees it. And we're still going to be doing our public lands access, our land acquisitions that are open to everybody. But community-based access is how can we reward landowners and regions and wildlife habitat in general and hunters? How can we make those all work in harmony? And really, Aberdeen Pheasant Coalition is the beginning of a lot of different things that have transpired here lately. And I'll just lay it all out. So couple years ago, I think it was 2014. Emmett Lenahan is a retired farm bill biologist for Pheasants Forever out of Aberdeen, and he decided, you know what? How can we reward landowners and put more habitat on the landscape at the same time? So he came up with the idea of this Aberdeen Pheasant Coalition. It's pretty simple. It started out with the local Pheasants Forever chapter, Northern South Dakota Pheasants Forever chapter, saying, we're going to raise money. We've raised $50,000, and we want to match that money with local businesses who benefit from bird hunters coming to town. So that could be restaurants, that could be gas stations. Sorry, my father's in the background.
You're good. No worries.
That could be restaurants. That could be gas stations. That could be mom and pop stores. Whatever it might be. That money, they're going to raise $50,000 from the chapter, $50,000 from businesses in town, and that was going to go towards basically creating two things. It was a landowner incentive. We would pay landowners an incentive to do two things, which is, number one, you have to sign up for a new CRP contract, so new grasslands in some way, shape, or form. And those new contracts were nesting habitat to make sure that pheasants have a place to go to make more pheasants for the next year. And the other second prong of that is it had to be tied to walk-in access. So new acres tied to walk-in access. The program has been absolutely phenomenal. And it has signed up close to 5,000 acres since about like 2015. So it was led by the chapter. It was led by businesses in town. And it kind of set the stage for, I would say, Aberdeen Pheasant Coalition 2.0. We've got a new program in South Dakota called PATH, Public Access to Habitat. Okay. And it's sort of the same thing, but it's statewide. So we presented this concept, and God bless them, to South Dakota Tourism, and Onyx is the big one. And Onyx and South Dakota Tourism came together and funded this program at $250,000.
Awesome.
And that's for signs and everything. So we just kicked it off at the beginning of the year here. For every $250,000, we're going to enroll 10,000 acres per year of private lands that are open to public access. So basically walk-in habitat. And in the first 2.5 months here since we've launched that program, we've already signed up 1,500 acres of new walk-in access for people to go enjoy.
That's phenomenal.
Whole bunch of contracts coming together. So yeah, it's great program. It helped us kind of see the future of community-based conservation. How can we help landowners, businesses, towns, hunters, and habitat and wildlife all at the same time? And it's not that, like, it's not a real, like, you don't have to be a brainiac to get the concept, right? Like, you're taking money and we should be paying landowners to open up access to quality acres. And that's one of the things we've trying to do with CRP and the Farm Bill too, is like, we need to make sure that we're paying landowners enough that it makes it it makes it feasible for them to do, because they're running a business on farms, and so are we for access, I guess. So we're looking to take this particular community-based access program, this idea of paying for access and habitat, and we want to go nationwide with it. So we're already in the process of identifying where we're going to go next. And we've got a new coalition together of staffers that are working on where these access programs are going to start popping up. So you'll see more about it in the future here.
Cool. That's so awesome, dude. Because one of the things that you hear all the time is, oh, it's, hunting's a rich man's sport, or it's turned into a rich man's sport. It's pay to play, yada, 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 yada. And it could be, whether you look at it like in the future, and it's the future's here and now, you're going to pay one way or another for access to good hunting, whether you're leasing directly from a landowner, whether you're contributing to access, in Wyoming to pay for walking areas, or whether you're creating coalitions like you just described and contributing to them. Because you're absolutely right. Where's the incentive for landowners in places like South Dakota, which are primarily private? You're hunting private ground 90% of the time. Yeah, I'd say probably more like 98% of the time. If you're not incentivizing landowners to let people on, nobody wins from that, because your local towns are have the ability to rake in a lot of money over the few weeks of the year that pheasant season is open.
And it's probably a little bit different concept, like out where you're based, and even further west where you have a large public land space. I think, one of the points I wanted to bring up on this podcast is that 2/3 of the United States is privately owned. So if we're going to make an impact for habitat and for access, it's going to be on the private land sides in some way, shape, or form. We are dead set on making sure that, we are communicating with landowners and paying them for quality access and habitat, if that's what it's going to take. You look at VPA HIP, which is Voluntary Public Access and Habitat Incentive Program through the Farm Bill. All the different conservation groups, including Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, are lobbying right now to try and change that from $50 million a year in funding to $150 million in funding in this next Farm Bill. And if we can get that done, matched with organizational money that's raised from chapters and not just Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, all the other different conservation groups out there, access is going to have a different face for the better. And if we can get that done, go from 50 million to 150 million per year, that's going to be a big deal. So
I think it's exciting.
Hold on to your shorts.
Yeah, buddy. No, I think it's an exciting time to be alive with this stuff going right now, Jared, because I would say even as short ago as 5 years, you hear everybody bemoan the fact that, I used to be able to hunt wherever I wanted. I could knock on doors and get permission to hunt wherever I wanted. And that still exists to an extent.
It does.
But for the most part, that's gone. And because it's gone, and I can't blame landowners for that, it's a large conglomeration of reasons why that's gone, but it's gone for in by and large. Now, there's going to be people listening that are going to be like, I still get all the permission. Good for you. Enjoy it, cherish it, because it's rare. I think this model is opening things up. Projects like this are opening things up, and the only way that hunting survives is to have some place to go.
Yeah,
we can recruit all the people that we want, but if those people don't have some place to hunt, so these models that you're describing are vital.
I think part of that too. I'm laughing because, like you just mentioned, I've still asked landowners. I get plenty of permission. I think in some way, shape, or form, I think the art of the ask is sort of dead. Like when I go out to South Dakota, I ask landowners on my own accord too for permission, and it still works, especially after you get after deer season here, which is the next couple of weeks. But like, I'll go out there with individuals that maybe don't do as much pheasant hunting and have never asked the landowner for access for anything. It's like, hey, go run up there quick and he's out in the tractor, just go get in front of him, wave your hands quick, and see if we can have a beer with them or something, or whatever. Give them a landowner gift and see if we can get some access, or just ask them. And they're always like, they turn like a ghost, like, oh, I'm not doing.
You mean I have to actually talk to somebody?
Yeah. So I think the art of the ask is a little bit dead. That's what I call it. But
no, you're spot on with that, dude. Spot on. I love it. Yeah, and I don't mean to rail on anybody or anything. I love this program. I love the incentives, the incentivization idea, and I love the program that you're describing and the initiatives, because I think it's, as we move forward, it's going to take creativity to hold on to what we have, or better yet, grow what we have. Yeah, because the habitat, as long as there's guys. Yeah. Anyway, you got to have access to it, and I think having a creative approach to it is important.
Yeah, I think Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, I know, is bringing sort of that innovation to access, and you're right. It's not going to look like it did 10 years ago. It's not going to look like it did 25 years ago. It's going to look totally different, and funding sources is a big thing, and we have to, that's part of the advocacy piece. We have to let our lawmakers know, like, hey, if we're going to continue funding conservation in this country, we need places to go, quality places. So
100%,
absolutely right.
100%. Yeah, that's one of the things that we are facing. It's a reality that we're facing in the Western states, because we do hold the bulk of public property. And you get up places like northern Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, northern Michigan, and there's some phenomenal public land opportunities in those places.
County, state, and federal.
Yeah, exactly. And it's the same thing out west, but it's getting to the point where pressure is to the point on a lot of those places, a lot of those properties, where the hunting really is not very good on public land in a lot of places. I look at the poor guys that live and hunt around Bozeman, for example. Mm-hmm. And that community has grown so large. Colorado's another one where their public lands are over recreated. I mean, they're over hunted, they're over fished, they're over hiked, they're over skied, they're over snowshoed, they're over, you name it, to the point where if they're probably going to have to start looking at some seasonal protections. And U.S. Fish and Wildlife is already doing that on some of the federal lands, where it's like, you can't go in here at a certain time of year because there's elk calving or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And it's just because of the demand is gotten so great for the consumption of public land for a lot of different reasons. So having those things is just vital. But that leads me into another question that popped up on here. And it was in the comments for this post. And the question is, what is the state of pheasants in the United States currently? Like, overall, what's like the outlook from Pheasants Forever's perspective?
Well, I'll answer this in maybe like 2 or 3 parts.
Yeah, it's a huge question.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate this year in that I, along with many biologists and members and anybody that hunts upland birds this past year, when you look at the weather patterns that came through, I don't care if you're in the West, upper Midwest, the Great Plains, we just got sacked by winter last year. So this is more short term than anything, and I'll get around to explaining the long term. But short term, weather can really impact things quickly. And when you look at the weather we had last year, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, even Montana, sort of that really, really stronghold right now of pheasant populations that are still relatively good. There are a lot of limits. A lot of limits are being shot this year, which is nice to see people, go out and do. But when you look at the weather that came through, we got sacked early on, right before Christmas last year, with cold, wet, heavy snow that basically came, and that was followed by cold temperatures that basically locked up food sources on the ground for upland birds. And then they continually got sacked sort of like bi-weekly going into the spring. And, you're driving in western Minnesota, in any place where they had really good pheasant populations, before that storm, and the birds are standing all over the road because they literally have no other place to go.
Oh.
And yeah, it's you get a very sinking feeling in your heart looking at that. And everybody thought, you know what? Hopefully we have a nice spring to help populations to bounce back, because it's probably going to be a down year. And to everybody's surprise, the birds are extremely resilient. We had the most perfect spring you can ask for, where it was with dry and just enough rain to keep bug production going after the chicks are hatched. And Southwest Minnesota, we had just in 1 year, I think it was 125% or 150% increases year over year of pheasant populations after they done the roadside counts. Iowa was up. South Dakota doesn't do counts anymore, but based on like landowners and our staff, birds are up there as well. I think North Dakota, it was up big time as well. So it just goes to show that we probably don't put enough faith in the bird, but it all comes down to habitat. They got to have winter habitat. They got to have nesting habitat. And one of the major things that has happened for pheasant and quail populations in the United States is the loss of the Conservation Reserve Program. And, you hear Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever talk about that program a lot, and the Farm Bill in general. And speaking pheasants specifically, the Conservation Reserve Program is the Cadillac of pheasant habitat. If we don't have that program, we don't have pheasants at near the level that we do right now.
And that, just to be clear, that's the CRP program.
CRP, Conservation Reserve Program, basically pays landowners a stipend to take land out of production,
right.
Idle it for a few years, and put quality habitat down. And it can address a lot of things. It can address, there's some states, South Dakota's a big one, has salinity issues, where salt comes up from underground and you can't even grow a crop. So that's where places like CRP and pollinator habitat can come in and put that on the landscape for a few years and help with some of those problems, so you can get back into production. But when you look at going back to 2008 Farm Bill, just after 2007, we had a lot of places in the country that had basically shooting their rooster harvest was the highest it's been historically in a long time. I mean, we had upland bird harvest highs in a lot of states. South Dakota, Minnesota that year shot almost 750,000 birds. South Dakota in 2007 shot over 2 million.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. But then you look at, they cut the Conservation Reserve Program to make cuts to the Farm Bill, and we went from about 40 to 42 million acres down to 20. And when you cut things in half, so North Dakota is a great example. They went from 3.5 million acres of grasslands and CRP down to 1 million.
Wow.
When you cut that in half, you are basically cutting your pheasant populations in half. So
right.
Where are we now? We're trying to get back to the 27 million acre cap that was set in the last Farm Bill right now. So we're slowly creeping back, and we've got a lot of advocacy work ahead of us to ensure that we stay at that or try to grow, because we can't go backwards right now. So pheasant populations this year, just due to the weather that we had and the habitat that we have on the ground, pheasant and quail populations. I know down in Kansas, Nebraska, other places like that, people are like, yeah, it's been a great season. And even as you get down into like Oklahoma and Texas, they had less hot weather, more rain, and some of those arid places and in the desert as well. A lot of the quail populations are controlled by the amount of rainfall they get. If they get it, there's a flush of forbs, there's a flush of bugs, and the birds can come roaring back to levels that we haven't seen since the 1980s. So, overall, upland birds have had a long-term trend down, but it all comes back to habitat. If we have a good habitat base, the birds can really kick off a lot of broods in the spring and summer. So
it's
that's kind of where we're at.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, that matches exactly what I've seen here locally. You know, there's everybody's going to be that's listening to this is going to be comparing what you just said to what they're seeing, in where they hunt. And some people are going to be like, "No, Jared's full of crap, man. We don't have any pheasants." Well, maybe your conditions locally were a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Here locally for us matches exactly what you're saying. We had a hard winter comparatively. This area of Wyoming right here is pretty sheltered from weather in the wintertime. We get it, but it comes and goes.
Mm-hmm.
But what we had was what you just said about spring moisture, just the right amount. We had a very wet spring, but very wet for us is good because we live in a desert.
Exactly.
So it dries out really fast.
Yeah.
So our pheasant numbers went from literally last year. I talked to guys that between high moisture content in corn, so the cornfields were standing well into past pheasant season closure, and bird flu being really, really hit us hard here locally. And between those two things, our pheasant harvest here and locally was way, way down. I talked to an awful lot of disgruntled pheasant hunters last year.
Yep.
But so far this year, it's the exact opposite. We had phenomenal bird recruitment. There's everywhere you go, there's birds. You talk about my wife shooting that buck last week or week. I think it was last week. It was last Friday. Just out deer hunting in the last few weeks, there's pheasants everywhere. Everywhere you go, there's pheasants. So it's nice. It's really good, and it's good to hear that production is up. I know we've talked about my brother and my dad in Iowa and the properties that they manage, and my dad specifically has just been bragging up how many pheasants he's got on the farm.
That's good.
And he's at the stage where he's more of a bird watcher than a bird hunter because he's like doesn't have a dog, and he's like, no, those are my home pheasants. I don't hunt those ones. It's like, oh, okay.
and it's interesting too is that the recipe to make pheasants and other upland birds, it's not that hard. You have to have quality habitat plus average weather equals birds. And quality habitat, I mean, like you look at pheasants, right? If you have a 20-acre block in the middle of nowhere, you might have a couple birds, but they need kind of contiguous blocks together, in between a mosaic of agricultural and grasslands together. But really, 20 to 40 acre patches are what pheasants grow in best. Buffers are okay too. They can help with that, but they need to be at least probably like 150 feet wide, which sometimes that's harder to find in today's world. So that block habitat where they can get in and find what they need, mixed in the agricultural landscape is a big thing. And just like you said, in the more arid climates, if you're going from one drought extreme into another drought year where the habitat, it doesn't green up very fast, so they don't have many places. They don't have many places to nest. If there's no bug production because it's so dry, you can even if it started off great and then you go into an extreme drought, you can kiss your pheasants goodbye and other upland birds because they have nothing to eat.
Right.
And in some cases, though, the past few years, we've had a flush of like grasshoppers throughout some of these western states that have really helped sustain broods going into like midsummer into late summer, and that's been sort of a saving grace. But that's why that pollinator habitat and having, you got to have enough moisture to keep things productive. If you don't, it can go sideways real quick.
Yeah. Well, that's phenomenal. That gets us through the questions that we had to get through. But Jared, how did you get your start? Because here we're looking at, you're very polished. You're very good at what you do. How did you get a start in this?
In Pheasants Forever or in hunting in general?
What you do for a living. And then we can talk about hunting. Because I know you're chomping at the bit, and we'll wrap up here pretty quick because Jared's trying to get to deer camp.
No, it's all good. If you're watching this or listening, I mentioned my dad. My dad came in. This is the note. This is the note that he came in to deliver right here, Todd. Going to store.
Hey guys, this episode's brought to you by Juniper Mountain Coffee. Juniper Mountain Coffee is a coffee company that might be new to some folks, but I tell you what, they've been bringing high dollar premium coffee, top of the line juice to the market for a long time, and decided that it was time that they put their name on it. And I tell you what, I'm stoked to be partnered with them. I've had a chance to try all the products that they have, and it is amazing stuff. If you're like me, you got to have your coffee in the morning, especially in a cold duck blind or gearing up to get ready to go chase some birds. Got to have that coffee, and you might as well reach for the best with Juniper Mountain.
He's going to get food for deer camp. So
Yeah, I love it.
I was just like, do you need to come in and interrupt the podcast to let me know that you're going to the grocery store? Anyways, yeah. So my getting to Pheasants Forever was sort of a winding trail for me. So I'll kind of go back. I didn't grow up pheasant hunting at all. I grew up ground pounding rough grouse. I mean, I didn't have a dog growing up. I was my own bird dog. That's what we did. That's what people still do. And it's been kind of an evolution for me. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota on the shores of Lake Superior, and I had the Superior National Forest out my back door, plus county ground and everything else. I mean, I had 5 million acres to go hunt. Feel very blessed for that opportunity because not everybody has that. Had a cabin in Northwest Wisconsin, have always had a cabin there. It's been great. Grew up deer hunting and stuff, but really didn't get into pheasants until I went to college. I went to Luther College in Northeast Iowa. And at that time, got there in fall of 2004. They had pretty good pheasant populations there. And we didn't have a dog. We just had a couple buddies, college buddies and roommates that liked to hunt. And we would just go out and push fields and try to get pheasants up and retrieve them ourselves. And but after school, the day I graduated, I hopped on a plane and flew up to Alaska. I was a wilderness guide up in Alaska for about a year. Loved it. Really loved it. Thought about going back, but I came back and then got engaged to my high school sweetheart. I did a lot of different things. I was, I worked at Lifetime Fitness for a while. I was a tennis pro there. Tennis and soccer were kind of my big things growing up. And then, I was a teaching aide for a while, just doing something to try to get me through. And I saw this opening at Pheasants Forever for a public relations specialist intern and thought it looked awesome. Applied, went in about 2 days later and interviewed with my boss, who I have now, Bob St. Pierre, who's pretty well known in the upland hunting world. And they gave me a shot. I worked for a year unpaid, and the only reason I could do that is my wife is a nurse. You know, she kind of filled the gaps for us. But after that, I basically asked for a shot. I was sent down to Iowa, and I was a regional rep. I had 52 chapters in the southern region of Iowa for 6 years. And then public relations specialist paid position came open, moved back to the office closer to family here around St. Paul, Minnesota. And my wife and I have 10 acres north of the office, about 20 minutes just outside of town, next to a 500-acre wildlife management area. I manage for pheasants as much as I can here with our chapter in the DNR. And that's kind of my evolution. I got 2 bird dogs. I got a pointer and a Labrador, and they're out in the kennel right now, so they don't bark at anybody while I'm trying to talk with you.
I love it. I love it. No, I love
evolution.
Getting people's story, because people listening to this, whether it's a young person trying to figure out what they want to do, or somebody that might be thinking, man, I really want to do something different. It's super interesting to get people's stories, because we all come at things from a different place, whether it's a different circumstances or a different idea or a different ideology or whatever it might be. Well, it's super interesting to understand your path.
It's interesting because when you mention that, I think a lot of people end up doing a career that like they didn't even go to school for, or yeah, same here. So
Crazy.
when I was in school, in college, my junior and senior year, I had my classes set up. I had all day classes Tuesday, Thursday. So I had Monday, Wednesday, Friday off. And if I wasn't hunting or hanging out with my friends and probably doing things I shouldn't have been doing, I was out hunting. That's what I like to do. So
Yep.
I started school. I went on a nursing track actually and exercise physiology. We have a lot of heart problems in my family. When I worked for Pheasants Forever down in Iowa, my dad had a heart attack and he had to get a emergency quadruple bypass. And I remember those days. I've never driven so fast from Southern Iowa back to Duluth, Minnesota to see him before he went in, And my dad's the one that got me started in the outdoors. You're going to make me cry here. Got me started in the outdoors. And I'm glad to still have him around, dropping me notes during the podcast that he's going to the store so we can go up to deer camp after this.
That's a blessing, dude.
Yeah, so my wife and I bought a cabin in Northwest Wisconsin on 40 acres, surrounded by public land on a lake, just a nice little log cabin, and there's a lot of deer up there, and we're going to go up and enjoy ourselves this weekend. But yeah, it's just sort of funny. So I got halfway through college and I'm like, you idiot, Jared, you're hunting all the time. Like you've always wanted to be like a conservation officer involved in something. So I started taking a lot of biology classes, ended up with environmental studies background with a lot of writing with it. We had this course at Luther called Paideia, that everybody had to go through the first couple of years of pretty intense writing course. So that's a little bit of my background, but yeah, I'm a people person. I love meeting people. I love hunting with new people. And that's where that Montana trip last year, almost all the people on that trip were new to me, except maybe Onyx and Federal, that I did it with. And it's just, right. I agree with you though. It's learning where people are coming from. I'll put it this way. Whatever you're involved with, if you're growing up and trying to decide what you want to do, here's a shout out to Nike. Just do it, right? Just go out and get a lot of experiences so you know what you want to do. And at Pheasants Forever, we have so many job openings all the time, from biologists to regional reps to I'm hiring in our department right now looking for a writer. There's so many different things. So if you're interested in conservation and you have maybe some of that background, like look at our website. Go to the careers page at the bottom of pheasantsforever.org or quailforever.org, and come join our team. We've just got great people.
I love it.
Yeah.
I got one more for you, and then I'll let you get on the road.
No problem.
People listening to this, they're listening to all the wonderful work that Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever do, and a lot of the other organizations as well. You tipped your hat to that. There's a lot of different conservation organizations that are doing a lot of great work. And what's the best way that somebody can get involved and make a difference? How people are going, okay, this is great, Jared, but I'm out here in Wyoming or I'm in Arizona and there's no Pheasants Forever chapters around me, but I want to help. I like this idea of this public access stuff that you guys got going on. How do I help? What do I do?
Yeah, no problem. I kind of want to give a shout out to the last Wyoming night. That was a great question about what does Pheasants Forever do? And it, like I said, it all starts at that local level. So number one is like, if you've got a base of people who care about habitat in your community and you like to go out and hunt, it could be pheasants, it could be quail, it could be another upland bird. The beautiful thing about Pheasants Forever is that our local chapters, our volunteers that run our chapters, whatever you raise, 100% of that stays with you. 100% of the fundraising stays with the local chapter, and you get to decide how to use it. So like in the case of Cheyenne, that Wyoming Access Yes program, they've decided that that's a great way for them to go. Maybe there could be other stipulations there where like they just can't get out and do habitat work. Outside of a chapter, I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to get involved. One would be, our national convention. If you want to learn more about us and take a trip, we're going to Sioux Falls, South Dakota this year for National Pheasant Fest and Quail Classic. That's a fun weekend
I'm
event.
Planning on seeing you there.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, if you want to come learn more, that's an awesome event. I'm planning to have 30,000 people through the doors this year, so that'll be great.
Love it.
We do have in a lot of different states, we have like adopt a game management areas where individuals, local volunteers go out and help. Like there's a rusty old fence line that needs to be removed. We can go and do that. Montana, same thing, like adopt a ranch program. The landowners that are offering access are volunteers and just individuals in general who care, go out and help those ranchers maybe redo a fence on their property or help, take care of a washed out road or something like that. There's a lot of different volunteer opportunities throughout the country that you can do. But I would, number one, if you're already begging the question about like a chapter, how do I get involved? Why don't I see more Pheasants Forever projects? It's probably that there's no volunteers or there's no chapter that's be created in your county. And I think some people might be fascinated to realize that like we got pretty big lists of volunteers. I mean, we got almost 150,000 members as part of this organization, and they stretch to all corners of the United States.
No.
There might be more people locally than you think that we could help round up and get to a meeting and be like, hey, if you guys want to raise money and go out and put more access to private lands within your county or within your region, maybe you want to do a land acquisition, maybe you want to come up with a program for farmers and ranchers to help them create quality habitat. Sort of the sky's the limit with Pheasants Forever, that as long as you're doing the fundraisers and getting that funding back, you can do whatever you want with it. And we're always looking for people to come up with innovative ideas, and we're not the end all be all. We're not the smart. We try to surround ourselves with smart people, and a lot of that comes from our volunteers and members, honestly. So if you're out there wondering what you can do, I think the first thing to do to pick up and just give me a call, and we can talk through where you're located, what opportunities might be available, and I'd be more than happy to do that. That's what I do on a daily basis around here.
Awesome. Well, I will, and I have your contact information, so anybody listening to this, give us a shout, and we can hook you guys up. If you want to start a chapter or you want to know more about opportunities in your area, we'll make that happen. That would be super cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. I'd be happy.
Well, one more question, and I'll cut you loose, man. And it's how I try to end every podcast. If you can only hunt one bird one way, what's it going to be?
I got to go back to my roots and having bird dogs now. I just took my daughter out last week on her first grouse hunt at age 7 up in the wilds of northern Wisconsin. So I would say October 10th. The leaves are maybe 3/4 of the way down. Anywhere in northern Minnesota has been lights out for grouse this year. Absolutely lights out. But northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin, leaves are falling. Everything is red and golden, and just a nice crisp morning behind either a Labrador or an English pointer is sort of my cup of tea. I'll be honest with you. And second to that would be anywhere in a big block of grassland habitat, having the pointer lock up on a rooster pheasant. Those two things I think together, but grouse probably wins out just because of where I'm from and my background.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, you and I grew up very similar circumstances and scenarios, and I'm with you, man. Rough grouse are awfully high on my list. So
yeah.
Well, cool, man. Have fun at deer camp. Go shoot a big buck, and I appreciate your time.
Will do. Good luck to you the rest of the season. I hope you're got some more hunts planned. And
yeah, I'm actually just coming into the teeth of my season, so
yes,
it's flip-flopped for us out here. We get all of our bird hunting is November, December, January, and February. So
get after it.
Yeah, buddy.
Hondo.
Yes, sir. He's gonna get some work on Saturday morning for sure.
Good.
Cool, man. Well, have fun at deer camp. Thanks, Jared.
I appreciate you. Thanks.
Yep. Bye. Cool. You can go ahead and sign off. I'm going to keep recording because I'm going to give a recap of high points on that we talked about. for my producer to be able to pull social media blurbs.
Does that work?
So,
Hopefully I wasn't too windy. Sometimes
no, dude, you were perfect as always. That was phenomenal. I appreciate your flexibility in being able to do this morning.
You as well. That turned out great. So
no worries.
We should try to find some more time to get together at some point and do some hunting somewhere.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing, because I know you guys came out and hunted some of my stuff, my stomping grounds down, and tipped some elk over, which was cool. I was happy to see that.
Yeah, that was it's just a different. Well, if you want to keep recording, I can catch up with you some other time too.
You go to deer camp. We'll talk later.
Okay,
let's chat on the phone next week.
Yeah, sounds good.
And we'll set up a time to actually get together and hunt.
All right. Happy Thanksgiving.
You too, man. Happy Thanksgiving.
Say hi to Brandon too.
Will do. Bye.
All right, see ya.
All right. So the high points, the highlights from this episode are obviously Jared is just a super interesting dude, has an extraordinary background in how he came to be the head of communications and the director of communications for Pheasants Forever. But one of the biggest takeaways from this podcast is how much work Pheasants Forever does for not just pheasant conservation, but public access and conservation in general, and the opportunities that are available through this organization to grow hunting access, not just pheasant hunting access, but public land hunting access. Say, for example, the Cheyenne chapter of Pheasants Forever, and putting all their money into the Access Yes program. The Access Yes program in Wyoming isn't just for pheasant hunting. It's a broad stroke public access that does phenomenal work. So that's a huge takeaway. 100% of locally raised money from Pheasants Forever stays local. That's a pretty rare thing, guys, and it's one of the reasons that I'm a big Pheasants Forever supporter, and why you should be as well. Obviously, talking about the bird number front, bird numbers, according to Jared, and from what I've seen personally, are way up across the board in the United States, including locally here. There's never been a better time to get out, find a piece of this public access, and go hunt pheasants, whether you're in the Dakotas or Minnesota or Iowa, or out here in Wyoming or Montana or Idaho, wherever it might be. If you've got pheasants, get out and chase them. I know that's what I'm planning on doing a little bit this weekend. So that's the recap. Those are the high points. Jared Wicklund from Pheasants Forever, thank you for joining me. Been a heck of a recording. I really enjoyed our conversation. And until next time, guys, we'll see you in the field.